Welcome back to the channel, folks. The road is bringing us here to far east Texas. We're here in Texarkana. We're back in 1946. A masked killer stalked these very streets, attacking young couples under the cover of darkness. We're going to show you some of those spots and take you by a few of the grave sites as well.
In the spring of 1946, fear settled over the quiet border town of Texarkana like a heavy fog. It started on February 22nd, when a young couple parked on the secluded Lover's Lane were brutally attacked by a masked assailant. Miraculously, they survived, but the terror was only beginning. Over the next 10 weeks, the mysterious attacker, later dubbed the Phantom Killer, would strike again. He targeted young couples in parked cars under the cover of darkness, attacking without warning and vanishing into the night before police could catch him. On March 24th, another couple was attacked. This time, 29-year-old Richard Griffin and 17-year-old Polly Ann Moore were found murdered in their car on a lonely road outside town. Then, on April 14th, Paul Martin and Betty Joe Booker were killed after a night out. Betty Joe's body was discovered nearly 2 miles from where the attack began, suggesting a terrifying chase through the darkness. The final known attack came on May 3rd, when Virgil Starks was shot and killed inside his own farmhouse. His wife Katie survived, despite being shot twice, becoming the last known victim of the Phantom. Despite a massive investigation involving local police, the Texas Rangers, and the FBI, the killer was never identified. And to this day, over 80 years later, the Moonlight Murders remain one of America's most chilling, unsolved mysteries.
All right, welcome to our first stop. Now, if you can see right behind me, obviously this is a mall. This is Central Mall right here in Texarkana. But if you use your imagination, picture this mall not being here. Picture it being February 22nd, 1946. This was all rural area. Now it was right around here. This is where Lover's Lane used to run through. This is where, on February 22nd, 1946, this is where the first attack happened. A man by the name of Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were parked on a secluded Lover's Lane after going to see a movie. Now, it is speculated this happened around 11:45 p.m. on that Friday night. Around 10 minutes later, a man wearing a white cloth mask, which resembled a pillowcase with eye holes cut out, it appeared on Jimmy Hollis's driver's side door, and the perpetrator shone a flashlight right through the window. Well, Jimmy then told him he had the wrong person, to which the man responded, "I don't want to kill you, fella, so do what I say." Well, that's when the perpetrator ordered them both out of the car, and after Jimmy came out of the car, the man struck him twice in the head with his firearm. Now, Mary Jean later told investigators that the noise was so loud she initially thought Jimmy had been shot, when in fact she heard his skull fracturing. Now, thinking the assailant wanted to rob them, Mary Jean showed him Jimmy's wallet to prove he had no money, after which she was then struck with a blunt object. The assailant then ordered Mary Jean to stand, and when she did, he told her to run. Now, initially Mary Jean tried to flee toward a ditch, but the assailant ordered her to run up the road. From there, she spotted an old car parked off the road but found it empty. She was then confronted by the attacker, who then asked her why she was running. when she said that he told her to do so, he called her a liar before knocking her down. Now, after the assault, Mary Jean then got up and fled on foot, running about a half mile to a nearby house. Now, right behind me is where that street is, over on Blanton Road. It's about a half a mile back that way. So when Mary Jean got there, people were sound asleep. So obviously with her banging on the door, the inhabitants woke up and then they phoned the police. Meanwhile though, Jimmy himself, he regained consciousness and alerted a passing motorist who also called the police. So far, that was the first assault. Not murder, because they both survived that attack. All right, we're a little south of Highway 67, right over here to my right. We're on South Robeson Road here in Texarkana. This is the spot, well, general area, where the Phantom went from committing assault to his first murders. And it was right out here, somewhere in this general area off Robeson Road on the night of March 24th, 1946. Richard Griffin and Polly-Ann Moore were both found shot out here in their car. Now the bodies were discovered by a passing motorist who saw the car parked out on Lover's Lane. Richard Griffin was found between the front seats on his knees with his head resting on his hands and his pockets turned inside out. Polly-Ann was found sprawled face down in the back seat. Both had been shot once in the back of the head and both were still fully clothed. A blood-soaked path of earth near the car suggested to police that they had been killed outside the car and placed back inside. Now inside, there was blood along the running board and it flowed through the bottom of the car door. .32 caliber cartridge casing was also found. Now if you look around this area, pretty much all wooded except for across the street. There's a supply company over there, but this is all still intact. I'm assuming this was probably all here when the murders happened back in 1946. But can you imagine? This is where the Phantom did a lot of his stalking from. He'd wait for people to come down these rural, desolate roads. He'd hide in these trees and bushes under the cover of darkness. That's when he attacked. Still seems kind of eerie out here if you ask me. What you are looking at is Spring Lake Park. One of the only places still around since the murders. It was here on April 14th, around 1:30 a.m. that Paul Martin picked up Betty Jo Booker from a musical band performance over at the VFW Club. Paul Martin's body was found at around 6:30 a.m. that morning. It was lying on its left side. Right here, where you're looking, this is the northern edge of North Park Road. And it's right along this little stretch of the road here is where Paul Martin's body was lying. Now, blood was also found on the other side of the road. Probably over that way somewhere. It was over by a fence. And Paul Martin, he was shot 4 times. Through the nose, through the ribs from behind, in the right hand, and through the back of the neck. Now, around 2 miles or so from Paul Martin's body was the body of Betty Jo Booker. She was found by a search party around 11 a.m. the next day. Her body was out here in a wooded area somewhere. Now, it's hard to tell precisely where, and that's, things change, agriculture changes, everything. Even though the park's still here, it's just, you can't determine where this happened, but this is about as close as I can get in this wooded area towards the end of the park. But her body was behind a tree and lying on its back, still fully clothed. It was posed with the right hand in the pocket of her overcoat. And Mary Jo had been shot twice, one through the chest, one in the face. It was the same weapon used in the first double murder, a .32 semi-automatic Colt pistol. Now, as for Paul Martin's car, that was about 3 miles from Betty Jo's body. It was parked right outside Spring Lake Park with the key still in the ignition. But somewhere out here, behind a tree, that's where Mary Jo was found. Like I said, it could be anywhere, but it's just kind of giving you the general area. Now, the fifth and final murder happened a few miles outside of town at a place called the Starks Family Farm. It was out that way. I've seen some posts where it said the farm has since been torn down, demolished, so it's nothing out that way. Even if we were able to locate the general area, it's on private property and land, so we wouldn't be able to go out that way anyway, I'm sure. So how that went down, the fifth and final victim was a man named Virgil Starks. He was sitting in his house reading the newspaper when he was shot in the face right through the window. So all in all, 5 people total were killed by the Phantom. 2 women, 3 men. Now, if you didn't know, this was dubbed the Moonlight Murders, and that was created by the news media. Although the first 2 murders occurred a week after the full moon, and the final attack occurred around the time of the new moon. So basically, the Phantom, he would strike, then vanish. Now, at the time, there were numerous individuals who claimed to be the Phantom Killer. Citizens came forward with accusations against various local residents, including an agent of the IRS. Now, there was one suspect, though, throughout all the ones that claimed to be the Phantom Killer. There was one that was most often cited as the probable killer. He was a repeat offender. His name was Yule Sweeney. He had a record of car theft, counterfeiting, burglary, assault. Arkansas law official. He did notice that before each murder, there were reports of a car being stolen and then abandoned. Now, in July 1946, a stakeout of a reported stolen car on the Arkansas side of Texarkana led police to a woman who claimed to be Sweeney's girlfriend. She provided details of the murders that had not been released to the public. Her story did change over time, and she married Sweeney, actually. Because of the unreliability of her testimony and her constantly going back and forth on the story, and the fact that she could not be forced to appear as a witness against her husband, law enforcement officials declined to prosecute. And in 1947, Yule Sweeney was jailed for life as a repeat offender for car theft, but was released on appeal in 1973. Now, there's some sources out there that say Yule Sweeney died in prison. Others say he died in 1994 at a nursing home in Dallas. All right, so we're gonna head out of beautiful and windy Spring Lake Park. We're gonna go pay our respects and show you the grave sites of some of the victims of the Moonlight Murders. What you are looking at is the entrance to Woodlawn Cemetery. Somewhere right back that way is the grave of Betty Jo Booker. But like I read about this online, right around the corner here from the sign is this memorial plaque, and her name is on here. There she is right there. 4th one down, Betty Jo Booker. We are here in beautiful Texarkana on the Arkansas side. This is Woodlawn Cemetery, and straight ahead is the entrance to come in. And Betty Jo's grave, we were getting a little worried because there was no real pinpoint on findagrave.com of where it was. Thankfully, it's not a big cemetery. I mean, it's, I would say maybe medium to small, kind of in between those two. But we did find Mary Jo Booker just driving by, and just look for that big Booker marker. And she is going to be right along here. There's Billy Boy. And right here, daughter Betty Jo Booker, June 5th, 1930, died April 14th, 1946. Now, if you remember, earlier in the video, Betty Jo Booker She was the one who was killed after leaving a band practice. She's picked up by Paul Martin after playing the saxophone at a VFW event. And that's where they park, near that Spring Lake Park where we were earlier. And both were casualties of the Phantom Killer. And right here, on the other side of Texarkana, is Hillcrest Memorial Park. And inside is the gravesite of Paul Martin. When you come into the cemetery, you're going to hang a left and circle around. And you're going to see a building or a shed. Looks like some type of shed, or right there in the background. And we found the family plot of Martin. And right here is the grave of Paul James Martin, May 8th, 1929. He died April 14th, 1946. It says, those who knew Paul best loved him most. And if you remember back at Spring Lake Park, he was the one found on the left side of the road pretty much as soon as you enter. Unfortunate. So young. So if you look right about the center of your screen, back in that area, I don't know if you can see that shed, that's where Paul Martin's grave is located. Also here at Hillcrest is the grave of the final victim of the Phantom Killer. And that's Virgil Starks. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, he lived in a farmhouse with his wife, and Virgil was shot through the window by the Phantom as Virgil sat there reading his newspaper in his chair. And here he is, Walter Virgil Starks, April 3rd, 1909 to May 3rd, 1946. Now, the other graves we weren't able to get to are that of Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore. They're buried way on the outskirts of Texarkana, very spread out, and it's a little bit of a drive, and we're kind of in a bit of a time crunch. So unfortunately, we couldn't make it out to their to grave sites to show you guys. Texarkana may look like any normal town, but once the sun goes down here, the dark history tells a very different story. From lovers' lanes to the victim's grave, for 80 years, this history has plagued this small little town. I hope you enjoyed today's video, folks. With that being said, we'll see you down the road.